Where do you want to start?
Honestly, I have no idea on this one. It just feels like such a loaded topic that can take us in so many different ways and to so many uncomfortable places. Like, I'm not going to open 4chan. Like, I'm not going to do that to myself. It touches on really personal things for people, right? Like, you also then have to understand how the filter bubbles and the algorithms like work. You have to kind of get into that. Part of the problem is too, when you're writing about something like this, you really want to take pains to be as objective as possible. What feels so intimately personal has been influenced by technologies from the outside, right? We don't want to feel like patsies. We don't want to feel like pawns. We don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like, clearly, we want to feel like, oh my God, we think for ourselves. Right around when we all started realizing that there were filter bubbles around everything we did. And it was like, that if you lined 4 people up in a row and they all Googled the same thing, they were all going to get different results, right? And people were sounding the alarm bells about why that was a problem, why it was a problem that we were all getting different information in these searches. And I remember thinking like, okay, so boring. Like, what's the connection to my life? Like, okay, that just means these results are more relevant to me. And now we're here in the landscape that has designed. We see this sort of splintered nature of our society right now, and so much of it is able to be traced back to those bubbles and so those echo chambers. And not only that, but the way that we actually consume media and consume ideas these days, which is like one after the other without context. So I guess for me, what it boils down to is like 3 things, right? It's immediacy, right? That everything has to be responded to right now, right this second. You have to speak. The second is like the collapse of any context for what we're talking about, because it's all just sort of like in part of the feed, right? And part of the feed is that it's like a complete non sequitur. And then the third thing is really like a collapse of empathy. You know what it feels like to scroll. Everything coming at you fast, because speeding creation and consumption serves the interest of social media companies. In order to be adept at social media, you have to navigate like a whitewater of information and rely on automatic thinking, snap judgments, and hot takes. This closes down the time that's needed for nuanced elaboration and complex political reasoning. But don't forget also that in the physical world, we remain present even when we're quiet or silent. But in the virtual world, if we shut up for even a single instant, we disappear. You can't just walk around and be visible on the internet. For anyone to see you, you have to act. You have to communicate. So more. Adding on to this is the fact that even when we're processing everything all of the time, because it's so much, we grab onto the most sensational things. And, sensational things like conspiracy stories are more attention-grabbing than, reality. Real facts tend to be sort of mundane and drab, and falsehoods are constructed to be novel, surprising, grab attention, and be shared. One 2018 study found that out of 125,000 distinct stories, those that were false diffused significantly faster and more widely, with the false information stories reaching between 1,000 and 100,000 people. The stories that were true diffused to fewer than 1,000 people. False news can also be highly persuasive, and unfortunately, fact-checking, this paper found, doesn't undo the effect of false news on your political views, even while it increases the factual knowledge of voters. On top of how interesting it is, divisive content gets promoted because the filtering algorithms calculate it'll strengthen user engagement and increase time on the platform. So in 2018, Facebook altered its newsfeed algorithm to boost meaningful social interactions, or MSI, between friends and family. The goal was to reverse a decline in engagement. So what they did was reward posts that got like emoji reactions or comments, thinking these are more meaningful. However, researchers inside the company warned that the change was having the opposite effect. It was making Facebook's platform an angrier place. One consequence of this is that the more frequently a person is exposed to a message, an observation, an opinion, a lie, the more likely they are to accept its validity. In the human mind, repetition counts as truthfulness. Today, we mostly consume news that corresponds with our ideological alignment, and it's been fine-tuned to make us feel self-righteous, but also mad. Research has found that political retweets are highly segregated along partisan lines, with extremely low connections between left-wing and right-wing users. So when we're presented with information in the form of itemized bits and sensational headlines, everything is then erased by the arrival at the next thing at the top of the feed. We lose everything that's adjacent to that gives us spatial and temporal context, right? People are then encouraged to serve up fragments instead of considered whole expressions or whole arguments. In addition, these venues don't need to build up trustworthiness over time like traditional news outlets do. Getting our information and our news from these platforms really tells us nothing at all because, in the words of Chris Hayes, these platforms are simply dynamic attention auctions where eyeballs are sold to advertisers based on which content makes you stop scrolling. This creates a schizoid collective brain, and we can't just react blindly and in misaligned ways to a barrage of stimuli, mostly out of fear and anger. And the more distracted we are, the more rapid and shallow our processing of information becomes, and then we start to rely on stereotypes. Megan Garber wrote a piece for The Atlantic where she starts talking about how we treat people we see on our screens and how we view them as entertainment. She says people on screens look like characters, so we begin to treat people like characters, the people around us who are fodder for any video we might want to put up. She says a republic requires citizens. Entertainment requires only an audience. So we start to see the people in our lives, or not even the people in our lives, the people around us in the world as just characters supporting our own main narrative. Mark J. Dunkelman is a research fellow at Brown, and he has an interesting way of conceiving of social alignment. So he says that we all have an inner circle here that's family and friends. He then says we have a really big outer circle, and this is our tribe, right? This is formed by shared affinities, okay? So these larger communities that we feel loyalty to, okay? He then says there's actually a third ring in the middle, and this is called the village. These are the folks who aren't close family and friends, and we don't feel like they're a part of our tribe that we've aligned ourselves with. So they're acquaintances, neighbors, they're your community. And what we've experienced in the last decade, 2 decades, is a real erosion of this middle sphere. So we have close personal ties, and then we have these broader communities that we identify with. But this part, the village, has eroded. And he says that family and friends teach us love, the tribe teaches us loyalty, but the village here teaches us tolerance. Because here's where you're going to interact with people who are not like you and who don't share your values. And it's the key to social cohesion, right? Being able to interact well in the village is how societies hold together, all right? When you don't interact in your village, you don't have any idea why the other side has their narrative, right? It's a complete mystery to you how they even arrived at the story they've arrived at. The village is the best arena for practicing productive disagreement and compromise. And that's what a republic or democracy requires. The sources I've found that are the most effective in explaining radicalization and this fragmentation are those that do so with empathy. And there's a huge list of books and sources below in our notes. They share the stories of people who've been radicalized through social media usage, but they also explore how that content provided answers, comfort, or an overarching mission or goal in a life that had previously felt out of control. Sherry Turkle reminds us that dependency on online communication can reduce our ability to feel empathy in general, as well as self-awareness. And it's important to remember that we learn empathy from the effects of our actions on others in real time, not online. I'd like to really focus on this quote from Naomi Klein's book, Doppelganger. It's tough to live in a moment when so many truths that had been sold as settled suddenly became wobbly and wavy under our feet. All of this destabilization places demands on us to change, to reassess, and to reimagine what we need to become. It should not be a surprise that instead of looking squarely at what has been revealed in wave after wave of unveiling, many are opting for some rather spectacular distractions. It's important to remember what's underneath all of this. All of the quick responses, the fragmented shouts. If we think of the white water of these fractured responses and shouts of information and argumentation, what is on the riverbed underneath? It is the fact that these companies make money for every second you look at your phone. Every additional second you look at their phone, they make more money. They lose money every time you put your screen down. These are software, like engineering decisions designed to favor the kind of divisive and polarizing content and conversations that don't let us see each other eye to eye anymore, that are preventing us from having conversations and being able to agree on what kind of world we want to live in.
So how can we start to create that world? Our next episode will get into how we can start to reclaim our attention and live the lives we want most. I'd also love to hear about people's experience of this fragmentation. What have you noticed in your own lives?